3 years ago, I was quietly bleeding $400 a month so strangers would think I was successful. And the worst part? I felt accomplished every single time. My name is Nora. I spend way too much time obsessing over why smart people make stupid money decisions. Here's what I found this week. I fell into three invisible traps, and once I saw them, I started catching myself doing the exact same thing everywhere: my closet, my apartment, my bank account. I want to be very specific about what that $400 bought because I used to lie to myself about it. I had enough sweaters, I had enough shoes, I had a coat that kept me dry in the rain. What I did not have was a wardrobe that made other people assume I was doing well. There was the blazer I bought for a meeting where everyone else was wearing jeans. There were the boots I wore exactly 4 times because they looked incredible in the store, but destroyed my heels on the subway stairs. I still have the scars, physical and financial. Then there was the bag that cost $340 because it had a logo that whispered something about taste. I did not particularly like the bag. It was heavy. The strap dug into my shoulder. But I carried it for 8 months because I liked the version of myself that I saw in the reflection of coffee shop windows when it was hanging off my arm. And then one Tuesday in January, I opened my credit card statement while eating leftover soup at my kitchen counter. The soup was free. The statement was not. I added up the clothing purchases for the previous 12 months, and the total was $4,800. I stared at that number for a long time. But that Tuesday, I realized something that changed how I saw every purchase I had ever made. I was not buying clothes. I was buying a 3-day high. And once I found the psychological trap behind it, I saw it everywhere. Here is the raw observation I could not shake that morning. The coat I was wearing when I read that statement, I had bought it 3 weeks earlier. I remembered walking out of the store feeling lighter, like I had just solved some puzzle I could not quite name. I felt accomplished. I felt like I had made a good decision. But by week 2, the coat was just my coat. It hung by the door. It kept me warm. The feeling had evaporated completely. And yet my brain was already scanning for the next thing that might make me feel that way again. It was not about warmth. It was not about function. It was about a chemical hit that, in my experience, lasted roughly 72 hours. I started calling it the 3-day high, and I realized I had built a life where I was chasing 3-day highs with 4-figure price tags. I started digging, and I found something that explained not just my closet, but almost every stupid money decision I had made in my 20s. I found this hidden force in my own life. It made me buy things I did not care about, to impress people I did not even like, with money I had not fully earned yet. I started reading about this thing called status anxiety. In his book, Status Anxiety, Alanda Botten writes about how people rarely judge their possessions in absolute terms. A neighbor's new car can make a perfectly fine car feel suddenly inadequate. That is not a rational economic response. That is my brain treating social perception as if it were survival. Here's what I learned about status anxiety. I noticed I never judged my well-being in absolute terms. I always compared it. I could be comfortable and fed and safe, but if the person next to me had something newer or bigger or shinier, my brain invented a problem. It told me I was falling behind. And falling behind, in evolutionary terms, meant being left out of the group, which meant danger. So my nervous system lit up, and the quickest way I found to silence that alarm was to buy something that signaled I was still in the game. I realized the problem. The relief is temporary, because the game never ends. There is always a newer coat. There is always a shinier car. There is always someone with a more impressive address. I am not climbing a mountain. I am running on a treadmill that someone else is speeding up. Then I stumbled onto this story from the 1700s that felt so modern, it gave me chills. I was reading about this French philosopher, Denis Diderot, and I found out that he once received a beautiful scarlet dressing gown as a gift. It was gorgeous. It was far nicer than anything else he owned. At first, he was thrilled. But then he sat down at his desk to write, and his old straw chair looked shabby next to the robe. So he bought a leather chair. Then his wooden desk looked wrong against the leather chair. So he bought an expensive writing desk. Then his old prints looked smoky and cheap against the new desk. So he replaced them with costly paintings. Then a large mirror took over his fireplace mantel. One gift triggered a cascade of spending that left him in debt, surrounded by beautiful things, mourning the simple life he had destroyed. I learned they call this the Diderot effect. It explains what happens once something shiny enters my home. And I laughed out loud when I read his essay because I had done the exact same thing on a much smaller scale. I once bought a $300 throw blanket and then spent the next 2 weeks hating my couch. I did not buy a new couch. I just sat there every night, glaring at the blanket, wondering why my living room looked poor. That blanket almost made me buy a sofa I could not afford. But social media has created a second trap. It puts shiny things on other people's bodies, making me feel like I need them before they even touch my closet. I used to scroll through my feed at midnight and see someone wearing boots I had literally never considered before. I did not need boots. I did not even particularly like boots. But by the next morning, those boots felt like a missing piece of my identity. I could picture myself wearing them. I could picture the compliments. I could picture the version of me that owned them being more confident, more interesting, more successful. I bought them. They hurt my feet. I wore them 7 times. They sat in my closet for months, taking up space, reminding me every time I opened the door that I had paid $220 for a fantasy. The leather still smells new. That is the cruel part. I finally dropped them off at a donation center last spring, still in their box, and the volunteer thanked me like I had done something generous. I did not tell her I was just cleaning up evidence. And the version of me that I had imagined, she never showed up. That is what status spending actually is. I realized I was not buying an object. I was buying a temporary membership card to a club I did not even want to join. I was renting an identity for 72 hours with no option to renew. Once I saw this pattern, I started noticing it everywhere, not just in my closet, in my apartment, in my car choices, in the restaurants I picked when someone asked me where I wanted to go. It was like putting on glasses for the first time and realizing the world had always been slightly blurry. First, the apartment trap. I was living in a neighborhood where the rent ate 40% of my income. I told everyone, and myself, that it was an investment in my future, that I needed to be around ambitious people, that the commute was worth it. But if I am being honest, the real reason was much smaller and much more embarrassing. I wanted the Uber driver to say "nice area" when he dropped me off. I wanted my friends to raise their eyebrows slightly when I told them my zip code. That tiny hit of social validation cost me $12,000 a year. I remember the first time I gave someone my address and they said, "Oh, that's a great neighborhood." I felt a warmth spread through my chest that lasted about 5 minutes, and then I wrote a rent check for $2,000. I was paying $2,000 a month for 5-minute compliments from people I did not particularly need to impress. Second, the car payment. I almost signed a $500 monthly lease on a car I did not need because a colleague had just bought one. She mentioned the model once at lunch. She showed a photo. Everyone at the table said it was beautiful. And that single conversation created a low-grade hum of inadequacy in my chest for 3 weeks. I started researching lease terms during work meetings. I started telling myself it was a safety investment, that my current car was too old, that the new safety features would protect me. I was one signature away from paying $6,000 a year to silence a conversation I was not even part of anymore. I still remember sitting in the dealership, the salesman smiling, the paperwork in front of me, and this quiet voice in my head asking, "Do you actually want this car? Or do you just not want to be the only one at lunch without one?" I did not sign. But the fact that I got that close still scares me. Third, the invisible restaurant tax. I used to spend $60 or $70 on dinners I did not enjoy, at places I could not pronounce, because I was terrified of looking cheap in front of people I barely knew. I have a receipt from a birthday dinner where my share was $83. The food was fine. The conversation was awkward. I laughed at jokes I did not understand. I agreed that the wine was excellent, even though I cannot tell the difference between a $15 bottle and a $50 bottle. I was hungry again by 10 o'clock. I remember staring at that receipt in the taxi home, watching the city lights blur past the window, wondering why I felt hollow instead of full. Here is the quiet rule of the week. Before I buy anything that costs more than $50 this week, I ask myself this one question. Am I buying this for me on an ordinary Tuesday when no one is watching? Or am I buying the story that someone else might tell about me? If the answer is the second one, I have learned to wait. I put my phone down. I close the tab. I walk out of the store. I wait 72 hours. I promise you this. The feeling passes. The alarm in my chest quiets down, and my future self gets to keep the money instead of handing it to a stranger who will forget about me by dinner. I have a specific story about how this actually works. Last month, I found a linen blazer online at 11 o'clock at night. It was $185. The model looked effortless. The reviews called it a wardrobe staple. I could already feel the fabric against my wrists. I added it to my cart. I entered my credit card number. And then, because I have been practicing this, I closed the laptop and went to bed. By hour 6, I woke up thinking about it. My heart was actually beating faster. I walked past my closet and told myself I had nothing that looked quite like it. The urge was physical, like hunger. I could almost feel the linen brushing against my forearms. By hour 24, I was walking past the store on my way to get coffee. I almost went in to try it on, but then I noticed I was already wearing a jacket I liked. I started to doubt. Did I really need another layer? Where would I wear it that I did not already have something appropriate? The doubt felt like a small crack in a window. By hour 72, the clarity arrived. I opened my closet, looked at the 3 blazers I already owned, and laughed out loud. The urge had evaporated. It felt like waking up from a vivid dream where I had almost done something I would regret. I transferred that $185 into a savings account I named Future Me. That money is still there, quietly growing, waiting for a decision that actually matters to me. The blazer is not. That $4,800 I spent in 1 year? It did not make me successful. It made me anxious. It made me broke. It made me perform a version of myself that I did not even like. The moment I stopped trying to look rich was the moment I actually started having money left over at the end of the month. My name is Nora. I spend way too much time obsessing over why smart people make stupid money decisions. Next week, I am going to tell you about the 7 quiet habits I killed after that Tuesday morning, and exactly what happened to my savings when I stopped performing success and started building it. See you then.